Hello, this is Michael Vandervoort, and it's another episode of Drive Through HR. I'm here with Robin Schooling, my co-host. How are you doing this morning, Robin?
I am fabulous. How are you? It is post 4th of July and Robin.
It is, and we haven't done a show in a while, so for the listeners who are jumping on, welcome to Drive Through HR. We're a hub for discussion of groundbreaking ideas, trends, and activities impacting HR talent, HR technology, and everything else in the workplace. Our focus is expanding knowledge and igniting curiosity as we hear directly from people who are shaping the future of the industry. And we have an interesting guest with an interesting, career that he's developed. So our guest today is Clay Martin. Clay, welcome to Drive Through HR. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Robin. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast. And I also want to say thanks for taking my LinkedIn request. I do a lot of LinkedIn work and I get a lot of no responses. I think LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool for professionals. And so I just want to thank you for taking my random message.
I work on LinkedIn a lot as well. Consulting company, we try to contact lawyers and stuff. So I know the feeling. And yeah, so you're welcome. I'm glad to do it. And it's especially easy when it's something that, is a little different or a little bit off the beaten path of traditional HR conversations. Why don't we get right into that? Why don't you tell us, obviously you're Clay Martin, but who are you behind the scenes and what do you do?
Yeah. Well, behind the scenes, I love mountain biking. So first off, I'm a big mountain biker and I love traveling to very remote places of the world. As a professional, I am the owner of Isla Talent, recruiting from Puerto Rico. It's the second business that I have founded, recruiting from Puerto Rico. And we focus on recruiting job seekers from Puerto Rico who are U.S. citizens and do not need a visa. We focus on recruiting them for jobs in the hospitality industry, manufacturing, construction, and healthcare. So we also do nurse recruiting.
I think when you and I did our little phone screen, timing of this kind of service seems to be remarkably, given the kind of current environment about people and workforce, immigration, and everything that's going on in the country. It seems like your solution offers something that might be very attractive, perhaps more so than even like last year. I'm just curious if maybe you want to start there and kind of talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I started my first company recruiting from Puerto Rico in 2016. I've been recruiting from Puerto Rico for over 10 years, and I did it just to provide another solution to labor shortages, but also as an alternative to the H-2B visa program, or as we're seeing more in the country right now, just situations with immigration and deportations. So recruiting from Puerto Rico, there's not a lot of red tape, and I spent a lot of time building a network, which I'll get to later. But yeah, it's a great alternative to the H-2B program. You're hiring American citizens that have all their documents to work and that can come work immediately.
Yeah. And work authorization is the whole bit.
And,
beautiful.
To add to that, I have had a huge increase in outreach from companies that want to work with me because of what's going on with the current political climate and deportations, immigration. So a lot of companies either A, need labor because of what's going on, or B, they're very scared of what's going on and they want to have a backup plan. And so that's kind of where I help navigate the conversation, and I have conversations with companies so they know that I'm here as a resource.
Yep. Tell us a little bit more about your journey in the building of Isla Talent, because you started in a way that lots of people don't necessarily start.
Yeah. Great question, Robin. So I kind of started, when I think about my career, one of the first things that comes to mind is my passion for speaking Spanish. I started learning Spanish at a very young age. I mean, I'm from Kentucky, I'm a white guy from Kentucky. No Spanish blood, no access to Spanish speakers. But in junior high, I realized that was something I was good at, language. And I also realized the importance of it. I also loved the cultural aspect of it. So I was kind of a nerd growing up with Spanish. I remember having like note cards posted all over my house. And I don't know if you guys remember Napster, but I would get into like like the chat rooms of Napster. Like I'd be like, hola, yo soy Clay, quiero hablar. And I'm like chatting with people that are in like Argentina. So in that, I eventually majored in Spanish. I studied abroad. I started working with Spanish speakers in the summers. I did landscaping and kind of just really enjoyed the culture and the language. And so that kind of led me to joining the Peace Corps right out of college. I lived with a remote tribe in Ecuador called the Sachila.
Wow.
Yeah, I lived in a hut, no electricity, no running water. I learned a tribal language. I speak a language called Safiki, which is only spoken by 3,000 people in the world. And
Wow.
yeah, I just had the most phenomenal experience. I gravitated to this culture and honestly fell in love with the area I was in and the people, most importantly. I still speak to these people that I lived with on a weekly basis.
Mm.
And so it was a wild experience. I learned a lot from them and they learned a lot from me. And we did a lot of amazing projects together, kind of helping them with some community tourism stuff and agriculture. And so I eventually enjoyed the Peace Corps and that experience so much. I decided to do the Peace Corps again. And I went and lived in Panama for 2 years, also with a tribe.
Mm.
Very remote, no electricity, no running water. And so, yeah, that was kind of like half my 20s, just basically living in the jungle, working and living with indigenous people.
Yeah. Wow.
That is very cool. Ecuador, I've never been. I've been to Peru, but I've never been to Ecuador, and that country is some place I'd love to go at some point, although I'm not sure I want to stay in a hut. Maybe too old for that at this point.
Look out for the
So,
look out
so
for the score.
yeah. Yeah. So Clay, you mentioned, you kind of touched on it with the no visa required thing here, but like there's a lot of people work with different government programs to try to bring in immigrants to work to fill roles in the country that we can't fill or don't have the appropriate skills, whatever the case may be. So there's the H-2A, which I think is the agricultural visa, and then H-2B, right? Can you kind of walk us through some of the elements of that and how hiring out of Puerto Rico kind of bypasses a lot, because it's a pretty bureaucratic process on that
Yes.
H-2B side, right?
Yeah.
Sponsors and can be
Yep.
very expensive.
Yes. So the H-2B program essentially is it's a temporary work visa. I believe the government gives around 66,000. Don't quote me on that, but it's around 66,000 visas a year for the H-2B program. And companies have to apply. Companies have to prove that they are a seasonal companies have to prove that they are a seasonal operation and that they are unable to hire enough local help. And so by proving that, then the government allows them to acquire visa workers. So
Mm-hmm.
it involves lawyers, it involves a lottery, it involves, the embassy. It's a lot of red tape. And a lot of these employers, this is the reason I started this is the reason I started Isla Talent a long time ago, which I can kind of talk about later. But I started it because I read about all these companies that relied on the H-2B program and then they were not getting their workers. They were expecting to get their workers in March and either they didn't come at all, or maybe they came 2 to 3 months later. And so companies are just kind of like, it's a very unknown process.
Mm-hmm.
It's very erratic and it's not as reliable as a lot of people would like. So when it works, it works. And to be honest, as an American citizen, I do believe in the H-2B program in a lot of ways, but a lot of companies spend a lot of money to try to get their visa workers and then they don't. And so tons of red tape, and the workers basically, once they get here, Michael and Robin, once they arrive to the United States, their visa is tied to one company. So they
Right.
cannot go anywhere else. They can only work for that company. So that's the H-2B visa program. My program, recruiting workers from Puerto Rico, my tagline is no red tape, no visas needed. So
Mm-hmm.
recruiting from Puerto Rico, no red tape, no visas needed. It's a very quick process, and it's quick for me because I've been doing this for so long. I've built a very large network of job seekers in Puerto Rico that trust me, and I think that's the biggest thing is these are U.S. citizens coming from Puerto Rico that trust me and rely on me to find their next job opportunity.
And I would imagine because of that and building this over the years, you can recruit at scale as well for people. So it's not just a one-off.
Yep.
It can be, I need a crew of 50, for
Yeah,
example, type of thing.
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that. I guess what that, the scope of some of these, hiring, projects that you work on and what some of the needs are and
Sure.
how you go about navigating that.
Yeah. So the minimum that I'll recruit for is 4 employees, and I'm a direct hire recruiting firm. So these are the employees of my clients, of the companies and the employers.
Yep.
So my minimum is 4, but I've recruited up to 100 employees for a company before. I've had a client literally buy an old Air Force base and a motel to house the workers.
Wow.
Which we'll get to that as well later.
Yeah.
It's everyone's needs are different, and I kind of help, consult on what I think is adequate, appropriate, necessary, and I basically help create a program for the companies that I think is going to work. Some companies literally will come to me and say, if I don't get 15 employees in the next month, I will lose my business. A lot of smaller companies, small manufacturers will say, if I don't get if I don't get a night shift in here, I'm going to lose so much revenue and
Yep.
production. And so, a lot of companies in the States are just, they're losing revenue. They're losing, their production's low and they're losing revenue. And that's where they come to me and I help fix that.
Yep. Let's touch on those logistics a little bit in terms of, okay, I need 50 people, 100 people, whatever. What's involved and how does that process work with working with these employers? What's the travel that's needed,
Yep.
housing,
Sure.
integration, that sort of thing? Because
Yep.
what's different is you're bringing the people to the jobs, because this job may be somewhere where the population didn't exist as well.
Yep, exactly. So first is I have a conversation with a prospect client and decide if I think they're going to be a good fit. I won't work with just anyone. I want to work with companies that I feel good about, that are going to treat workers well, that have a good company culture and value their employees. There's a huge human aspect in this. So, if I hear a company say like, I need 10 bodies in 2 weeks, that's a huge red flag. I don't refer to humans as bodies. These are people. And so I really try to find out if this is going to be a good fit with the potential client. And so I gather as much information as possible from them. We create a job offer together, a job description, and I get all the information needed. The companies are required through my program to provide the transportation to get to the job site. Typically that's a flight from Puerto Rico. And also it's required to provide furnished housing with basic necessities. So I don't need fancy artwork on the walls or PlayStations, but, typically it's just, furniture and tables and cookware and bedding. And then also some type of transportation to and from work. One of my clients, the companies, some give free housing and some will deduct the costs of all of that from their paycheck. They will deduct the flight or the housing or and whatnot. So the companies, they have some skin in the game to help set these workers up and help assist to relocate them. But then once they're there, they can deduct it from their paycheck.
Yep.
So Clay, I was curious about this earlier, and I actually didn't make it a question, which I should have added in, but it's fine. Can I ask it now? Is the vast majority like short-term spots, seasonal spots? Is that kind of the concept here, or do you bring people over like that wind up staying as well, or
Sure.
how does that break down for you?
So we do a mix of both, probably 50-50. Some of these are seasonal jobs. My landscape clients, my construction clients, my hospitality clients, they're seasonal, usually 9 months. And then my year-round, full-time year-round jobs are more of the manufacturing jobs, the nursing positions and stuff like that. So it's a mix.
Yeah, I saw on your LinkedIn that I don't know the exact date, but sometime recently you started doing nurse recruiting as kind of a. But why don't we talk about your vetting? How do you determine your vetting process? I guess I should say, to complete the sentence. How do you figure out who's a good fit? That they're not just there for a couple of weeks, and then I imagine that there's some things going on here where maybe people have never been off the island of Puerto Rico before, so
Sure.
homesickness, culture shock.
Yeah.
Talk to us about all that stuff.
Yeah. A lot of it, communication for me is essential. So a lot of it just kind of starts off with just chatting with an applicant, just chatting with them on WhatsApp. That's a application that a lot of workers use, or a lot of people in Puerto Rico use. So I just kind of chat with them and kind of gauge how professional I think they are, how engaged, how serious. And eventually, I'll request their resume if they make it that far. And then I try to find any of the jobs that I have available and try to find the right fit based on their resume. And eventually I'll have an interview with them, see how the interview goes. And I ask for a background check that comes from the Puerto Rican Police Department. So they provide that. And a lot of it is just based on consistent, ongoing communication. I would say, because of the demographic of people that I recruit and the ways that I recruit, there's a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth, kind of different from maybe your traditional ways of recruiting. I mean, I'll have people texting me at 7 a.m. and I'm responding, I'm available at 9 o'clock at night. And so I think I have a lot of weeks and weeks of engagement with these workers or applicants to kind of just how how great of a fit I think they'll be.
Nice. One follow-up on that. When you and I chatted, last week, I told you that I had learned some facts about Puerto Rico recently that I was unaware of. Can you just talk about Puerto Rico? Like a lot of people from the States have never been there. I've never been. Can you just talk about like the talent pools that are available and kind of the economy a little bit? You don't need to give us an economics lesson,
Yeah,
but
sure. Sure. Yeah. So, Puerto Rico is a small island in the Caribbean, U.S. territory. It's somewhere that is beautiful. But they've had their own struggles with hurricanes and some of their government and that kind of stuff. But there's a huge manufacturing footprint there, pharmaceuticals, obviously, hospitality, huge hospitality industry, a lot of people with hospitality experience, culinary, a lot of welders, a little bit of agriculture. You would think there might be more, but it is a small island and it's a very populated island. So there isn't as much agriculture as people would think. But people there are hardworking and eager to better their life. And a lot of them do want to come and apply their skills in the United States and learn more.
Hmm.
thanks.
Mm-hmm.
With that variety, those industries that you work in has really been informed by that diversity of skills that you can find in Puerto Rico. So you're working with, we talked about landscaping, construction, healthcare, hospitality. Any other industries? Any surprises over the years in terms of industries you've gotten involved in?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most random clients I had, they clean and transport porta potties. I found drivers and people to work with porta potties. I had a potential client reach out. I declined to work with them, but I had someone reach out that had like an exotic reptile farm and they needed people to work with like alligators and stuff. And that sounded like a lot of liability. So I did not do that. I've worked with some of the largest landscape companies in the country, that do close to $80 million a year. I've worked with, I mean, I can't name them, but it's like, some Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
So it's just such a great resource. It's something that I can't say is going to change the country because Puerto Rico is a small island. There's only like 3 million people from Puerto Rico, but I can't say that's going to change the country's labor force, but I know for a fact it has and will change a company's labor force.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen and I helped make that happen. So, yeah.
The context of this question that I created is a little murky, to be honest, but media and industry coverage boosted your credibility. So talk to us about, you mentioned MRC, which I think was your first company, and now Isla Talent. Give us kind of the origin story. I know, I mean, we got the Peace Corps stuff, but like building the company, starting out, how have you scaled yourself and how have you grown your brand?
Yeah, I love that question. So right when I got out of the Peace Corps, I was in my late 20s, and the first job I got was managing dairy farm workers in upstate New York. So I traveled all around to different farms, and I was a translator, a recruiter, and a manager. And so a lot of those workers the majority of the workers were migrant workers from Mexico that were just mostly green card workers, and they would come and go and float around farms, and I would help translate and recruit them. My employer at the time decided to start recruiting people from Puerto Rico because some of the farms were honestly getting raided. There were some people that did not have appropriate paperwork and stuff like that. I mean, this might be too much information, but I would vet them and I would see their paperwork. But when they would get audited, that's a different story, right? So I did my part and I was following the law. But when they actually got audited, that's a different story. We started recruiting people from Puerto Rico. I kind of helped spearhead that. I learned a lot. I did that for about 2 years. And then eventually I moved back to Cincinnati, where my family's from. And I took a stab at the corporate recruiting world. And I don't know if it was my adventurous Peace Corps kind of travel adventurous lifestyle, but tucking in my shirt every day and working from a cubicle 9 to 5 was not for me. Thankfully I got laid off. I don't know if it was for me trying to bring a quite large palm tree to the office to help me feel more like I was in the jungle, but I don't think they liked that. So I spent a few months unemployed, and I just started thinking, hey, I want to do my own thing. And what about recruiting from Puerto Rico? I started doing it. It was one of those things, guys, where it was, if I think back on it, it was like a movie. Like I literally feel like I started a business overnight. I'm sitting there drinking coffee until 2 a.m, and I just started researching the H-2B program. I started networking with people that I knew about the H-2B program. I started reading articles about people that didn't that companies that used it that didn't like it. I'd reach out to them directly, and I basically started a company overnight, and I just started building a talent pool in Puerto Rico. I bought a one-way flight to Puerto Rico, rented a, and once I realized how promising this looked, I called my best friend from Peace Corps and I said, I need you to come to Puerto Rico. You're bilingual too, and we need to build this talent pool. And we spent a month. I had no money at the time. I got the cheapest Airbnb. My friend slept on the floor. A pipe broke and flooded the room. I mean, it was like we're in the middle of the island, just figuring it out. It's one of those things like you're just figuring it out. And we drove all around the island doing job fairs and basically building a talent pool.
Mm-hmm.
What really helped make my business at the time take off was I was featured in a podcast and a news article by one of the biggest landscape media companies in the country. And that is what my phone was just ringing off the hook. I mean, it was
Cool.
It was gangbusters. I just remember driving through the island of Puerto Rico and like I'm on the phone with a client and my buddy's taking calls in Spanish from the job seekers. We're switching phones and I'm like, take the wheel and pull over. And it was that for about a month. And then from there, honestly, things just took off. Things took off. And I'm super grateful. I had a lot of people help me along the way and I learned a ton.
Pretty cool. We have about 5 minutes left. A couple more questions. Robin,
Sure.
I think you're up.
Yeah. What have you found your role is long term with these placements? And by that I mean, how involved, if at all, do you get with retention? Do your clients call you back? Do the employees that you've placed call you back? What's your role in that?
Sure. So I take a lot of pride, Robin, that I am a small business and I'm kind of a one-man show. I mean, I used to have some recruiters and account managers that worked for me, and that was great, but I was always extremely involved. And so I think one of the reasons I've been successful is this isn't like a ladder or chain of command where there's multiple people involved. If a worker reaches out to me, they're talking to me, they're not talking to anyone else. I'm responding almost immediately all hours of the day. If I have a client, it's the same thing. If I sell an account, then I'm going to be their account manager. And then if there's issues, once the worker is placed, I'm the one that's staying involved. So a lot of companies, a lot of staffing and recruiting companies, they have an account manager, a staffing or a salesperson. And it's just, there's so many people involved. With me, it's, if a worker has an issue, they contact me, they trust me, I kind of talk them through it. And then I call the company representative. I express what's going on. I ask if they want me to engage and help anymore. And I just let them know my opinion on how to handle the situation and kind of give some consulting. And then I'll go back to the worker and say, hey, I've reached out to your employer. Don't worry, we're going to get this taken care of. And I think a lot of the reasons I've been successful is, when you're dealing with these workers that are coming from a faraway place, it is a sensitive situation and they sometimes are nervous and homesick or feel taken advantage of or whatever it may be. And the fact that I am literally excusing myself from dates with women to go to the bathroom and be calling these people from Puerto Rico is probably the reason that I've been single for so long. I literally remember like being in church with my parents and I'm like, I have to take this. Like a person is flying from Puerto Rico to Texas right now. The flight is delayed. I have to go fix this. I have to attend this person. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I'm extremely hands-on and extremely involved, maybe too much, but I take a lot of pride in that. And I know this was probably one of your guys' questions for the end, I think, but, you guys are HR experts and, the biggest piece of advice that I can give to anyone is just being available and being genuine about your availability and your communication. Don't just check off a box and say, hey, how you doing? Okay, cool. I asked this person. No, it's like really show them that you care and you're listening and you're empathetic and people can smell that a mile away. They can tell if you're being genuine and they can tell if you are just doing it just to do it. And so I take a lot of pride in that and kind of having a lot of skin in the game, not just for my employers that I work with, but also the recruits in Puerto Rico.
It really sounds like you're an extension of that client's HR team or management team and making sure that it's not a one and done.
Sure.
Let me stay invested with that employee experience.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
there's
it
your
is.
start.
And I'm trying to do more of that, as I'm expanding my services, expanding my business, growing as a professional. I love the recruiting aspect, but I'm really trying to
Hmm.
get clients to work with me in that capacity, to let
Yeah.
me be a kind of a third party
Yeah.
HR person that's bilingual,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
anything. Whenever companies do hire me to kind of go the extra mile and do that, they are extremely happy because it's a full-time, I mean,
Yeah. Well, hey, Clay, thanks so much for being our guest. This was really interesting. And I love the way you kind of took your passion for, travel and your passion for
Hmm.
language and kind of built a company out of it. It's very cool.
Hmm.
Not everybody manages to pull that off. So I give you a lot of credit for finding that niche. That
I appreciate it.
you may have already sort of done it, but the last question we always ask is, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners? And then please share where people might find you if they're interested in learning more about how to
Yeah.
hire out of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts, it's kind of cliche, but failure is how we learn. We learn more through failure than we do through our success. Failure leads to success. And I think that's what the Peace Corps taught me. It just taught me not to be afraid of failure. And I failed a lot and I just kept getting up and learning. So, and just not being afraid to do your own thing, and step up your game in whatever capacity it may be. So people can find me on my website. It's recruitingpuertorico.com, recruitingpuertorico.com. And they can also check me out on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Clay Martin.
And we'll as always do, we'll publish those in the show notes so people can find them as well that way. So thanks so much for being our guest. It was great to have you
Hmm.
on. And Robin, it was great to see you again. I'll talk to you
I know.
in a week or so. I think we have another show set up for next week. So I'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good. Fabulous show. Thank you, Clay.
Thanks,
Thanks.
guys.
Bye, everybody.
So, Robin, tell me about your book.